Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Event Icons. Today, we're going to be talking about working remotely when you're out on the road, when you're working with people who are on the road, when you've got a virtual office, when you've got people working in different time zones. How do you all stay connected? We're going to find out from Mr. Will Kern and his team at Endless Events as they work remotely all over the world, and we're coming up on that right now.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #EventIcons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything.
Just go to www.event-icons.com to ask questions.
Our iconic guests will answer them live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better the conversation. So please help share #EventIcons
on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #EventIcons.
Okay, so, right, let me first introduce, you know him, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Will Curran of Endless Events. I almost fired up the adjective generator from our other podcast, Event Tech podcast, but really excited to. This is a topic we've had boiling around for a while, and we've been trying to find a good time to slide it in, and I think today is the day. Probably the best thing to do, I don't know if you want to, talk a little bit about Endless's model and how you guys work first, or do we want to bring our other guests in?
Yeah, let's talk really quick bit. One sentence explanation, but yeah, Endless is a fully remote, or as we say, distributed company. We're all over the world, literally have people in all kinds of time zones. You'll get to meet some of our amazing employees who are in different time zones, which is presents its awesome challenges and its awesome opportunities as well. And yeah, I figured firsthand, we've been doing this now for so many years, I thought it'd be cool to share some of our experiences personally, as well as a company, what's like working remotely.
All right.
So should we bring along our esteemed guests for the afternoon?
Let's do it.
And good night. Well, one person I'll bring the one that you guys all know. She has been a host and a guest of the show many times. Miss Caitlin Colston in the house. Caitlin, good to see you again, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I forget what episode number it was. We'll find it out and put it in the show notes. But you can find Caitlin's story and what she was up to all this time. But we'll give a little bit of an update. But Caitlin heads up all of our awesome content at Endless. And she is known as our content alchemist. So, she's a pro. And I think one of the coolest things about Caitlin is that you work at home primarily.
Yeah.
Always. You're hardly ever at coffee shops. You're always at home.
Not too much. Usually at home.
And you also have a toddler as well. So you have the balance, the toddler plus the working at home, which I think is pretty exciting.
I have a wild 3-year-old.
So I think that'll be a really interesting story. But should we bring on our last guest as well?
What if I said no?
Well, we'll just continue the show, and I can just see that person waiting in the off screen right now.
That'd be really awkward because it's already late at night for her.
Yes, exactly. We made her come all the way. She's currently broadcasting where it's 11 p.m. at night from Portugal. I want to welcome Mariana Fernandez. Mariana's our awesome content chemist. If you ever read a word on our blog post, Mariana likely wrote it. She is a fantastic writer. She also loves coming up with the adjectives of Brant and I for Event Tech Podcast and everything like that. And she's the master of keywords. But Mariana is fantastic. So we haven't had you on the show yet.
Not yet.
Before we talk a little bit about remote work and everything like that, I did want to give the opportunity to talk a little bit about what got you to where you are today working remotely. And I do think you have a very interesting story of what got you working at Endless as well, if you want to bring it on in.
So actually, I'm in Slovenia. I'm from Portugal, but I've lived in Slovenia for...
I didn't even know that. See, this is when you work remotely. You don't even know.
I'm a digital nomad with a capital N. Yeah, I moved here to live with my boyfriend. Which, by the way, perks of working remotely. We can start there. But yeah, so I found Endless when I was, I'd say, round about midway through my master's. I was doing my master's in marketing, and I kind of wanted to jump into the world of work, but I couldn't really leave the country yet. So my dad knows people at Sandbox, and Will, of course, is in Sandbox. And they were looking for a content person, and I'm kind of good at content. They were like, you can come in. Can come in.
And
So,
I remember
yeah, and
we're
here I
looking for
am.
and we're looking for the position they said. And I remember Sarah Ramos, who introduced me to you. She said, "Oh, can it be anybody in the world?" And I said, "Look, like I don't care where they are. I want the best person for the job." And definitely the best person.
Can you guys expand and talk about what Sandbox is?
Yeah. Oh man, do I ever talk about it on the show? I don't know. It's
think
like,
you have. That's why I wanted to
Yeah.
kind of get it in.
Yeah, Sandbox is like badass people under the age of 30, as I like to call it. It's this like exclusive club of high performing people who, entrepreneurs, doctors, authors, philanthropists. It doesn't really matter. Just you have to be doing something incredible under the age of 30. And I know that sounds really egotistical as I say that. But what's cool about that group is there's a lot of the term digital nomad is so common in that group. So, when we were looking for somebody, we knew that if they knew somebody in Sandbox, they likely they understood that culture and what it was like to work wherever and what it's like working in kind of like a newer age company, not necessarily age as in young, but just newer age as in forward thinking stuff. So yeah, Sandbox is pretty cool. I think we're going to eventually probably do an episode on one of their summits that they do, but we'll do that later. So that's Sandbox. Should we jump into remote working? So maybe really quickly, let's all very briefly say what is our normal work like location / situation that we're kind of in, because like I kind of mentioned with Caitlin, and maybe we'll start with you, is you work primarily at home, and then maybe just iterate a little bit on like, would you ever go to coffee shops? Like what's your kind of like normal location look like and where you're working?
Sure. So yeah, I usually work at home. A lot of the times in this office, or if Chloe's home, my toddler, hiding somewhere from her. But I also, depending on like what I'm doing, or if I need like complete focus, something like that, I'll also just like go to a coffee shop where no one's bothering me for anything, that kind of stuff. And then also it's nice, just like if you're going to visit somebody, you can take off on the road and you don't have to take time off. You can still work from wherever. So that part I really like as well, but I do work quite a bit from right here.
Well, that's fantastic as well. And I'm curious to know too, I think this is why I'm just going to go rapid fire down the line. Brant, you are constantly on the road as well. And you literally, sometimes I have no idea where you are. And the only other person I know like that. So Brant, talk a little bit about like your work situation and kind of where you work remotely, where are you at mostly, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I've been living La Vida freelance now for over 5 years. So when I am home and in town, I work out of my lovely home office here. This is the new and improved home office, version 2.0, since we moved a few months ago. And then the complications from there is, as most or a lot of event professionals, find myself on the road a fair amount. I actually do far more shows outside of the Twin Cities area than I do in at this point. And so, yeah, I spent most of January on the road, as I've mentioned on a couple of the shows. I think I was home for maybe 5 days during the month of January. So it's been an evolving process. I mean, when we'll get into the bits and bobs here in a bit, but so just, I guess for me, my personal challenges are keeping this office space organized in a way that makes me comfortable in work, but then also how do I carry that out onto the road and stay as effective as possible for keeping up on industry things, for, how do I stay on top of, listening to podcasts, for staying in touch with clients, right? I mean, everyone's show is the most important show to them. So being able to stay in touch and be able to respond in a reasonable amount of time is obviously of the utmost importance.
Epic. I love it. All right, Mariana, I didn't even know you were in Slovenia right now. I just assumed you were still in Portugal the whole time. So talk a little bit about what your remote work situation looks like, where you're working from, that sort of thing. Obviously in a completely different time zone than the traditional work hours, because we're primarily a US based company for the clients we serve. So talk a little bit about your setup and all that sort of stuff.
So for me, it was really like organic to be able to do this shift from being a college student to working remotely, because I feel like, at least in Portugal, at least here in Europe, we have this coffee shop culture kind of life. So it was always really a part of my workflow, so to speak, because I really enjoy being surrounded by people and by background noise while I'm working. So I very seldom work from home, because I feel like if I'm confined into the same space for many hours a day, I go a little bit of crazy. Not the bad crazy, just a little bit. But so my days mostly, I usually wake up, and I tend to wake up at the same time as my boyfriend and our roommate, so we can all have kind of coffee together. And I feel like that really helps you establish a routine. And I think we can go into that a little bit later on about the discipline part of remote work. And yeah, so mostly like I wake up and I just go to a coffee shop and I just chill there. I work there for around about 4 or 5 hours, and then I come home and then I fit like gym and social life in that context too. But yeah, I'm a coffee shop life kind of person, and I feel like it
Oh,
really works.
I like it. I like it. I'm definitely a mix of. I think coffee shops are probably my thing for sure too. So mine's kind of similar to Brant. Like I'm on the road a lot for shows and events, and I also really love to travel too. So sometimes I just go to Ireland for a week, as these guys know, just to enjoy the work and remote work from there. But when I'm not in Ireland or on site at a show, this is my home office / studio where Whiteboard Wednesday videos are filmed. I have this is like where I'm most productive, and my monitor, my fast computer, and everything. But also very commonly, as these guys know as well, is that I'm also usually caught either at Press Coffee, which is down the street, or Luana's, which is another, it's basically a restaurant coffee shop. And I love working there, especially if I'm feeling de-energized. I go there to kind of get re-energized by people and everything like that. So yeah, cool.
Can we hang on that for 1 sec?
Yeah.
Because I think, as we dive into the tactical side of this, what I've discovered is, when you and I are on site together because we're speaking together or something like that, having that coffee shop buddy is a way to stay really engaged and to stay on task. Sometimes I'm really productive during a show because I have to be there and I can't like get up and move and walk around or something like that. I'm kind of locked to the tech table. Sometimes I have to be paying attention to the point where, I can't do email or anything like that. But same kind of thing with a coffee shop to a certain extent, like, because you're there and the other person is there. And so it's a lot, more difficult to get distracted, wander off, do something that you shouldn't be doing right now. So I find it helps keep me on task.
I do agree with you, and I have a friend that I met here in Slovenia that also works remotely, and we have kind of this partnership going on where 2 times a week we go to a place and we work together, and that helps fight isolation, which I feel is a challenge of remote work, definitely. And it also helps keeping you like, you kind of have this office banter that you don't get any other way, but it also helps keep you focused. So definitely good tip right there.
I think they've formally now named that called co-working, as they call it now too. So I think that's like the term that now is like co-working spaces
Cool
and things like that, right?
tip.
Yeah, like I think for sure there's a need for it. Absolutely, have that buddy, and I say constantly, people that I don't even work with, that literally have no reason other than they're a friend that I know they work remotely. I go, hey, you want to co-work today? And I'll text them in the morning, say, come join me by 10 o'clock and we'll co-work together. And sometimes only for a couple hours, but it feels really good. I don't know if you guys do the same thing at all in any sort of way, and felt that as well. Caitlin's got a permanent co-working buddy, her toddler.
Well, she's at school most of the time, thankfully.
Thankfully. Well, talking a little bit about isolation, maybe I think that's a good transition to make into that. How do you guys combat isolation when it comes to remote work? Because it's really easy to have a home office, be locked in here, and not talk to somebody for literally hours at a time. How do you guys combat it? Feel free, anyone jump on in.
And even if you go to the coffee shop, you still end up kind of being alone, because you talk to the people who bring you your coffee, and maybe you go to the same one like 4 times a week and they already know your order. Like this happened to me last week for the first time, and it hit me. You come here a lot of times. Like they know exactly what I have for lunch and for our morning coffee. But yeah, isolation, especially for me, was like a big concern because I'm very much a people person, and I like people and I like to be surrounded by people. So I think Slack helps a lot, and the meetings that we have. So trying to make it work with your team, that you have weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings, and that you have regular one-on-ones, and that you just chat in general, even if it's not about work, with the rest of your team. That helps. Having the buddy that we were talking about helps. Co-working spaces that you can like rent a desk. I don't know if it's a thing there, but it's like a huge thing here
Definitely.
in Europe, like huge. That could also help, and they usually have like these little Slack channels in between them, and they organize like group activities. So that's also a good one. But yeah, I guess it also depends how you kind of schedule your work and how you schedule your day-to-day in order to kind of fit more social life into weekdays than you would normally on weekends if you worked like a regular 9 to 5. I think that's how I feel.
Yeah,
That's
I would
some good
agree with
stuff.
that. I know Mariana's on my content team, and we have a bi-weekly meeting, and I think that we didn't have that for a long time. I didn't want to add another meeting to everyone's plate, and eventually I just decided it was something we really needed to do. And just by having it, we only started having a regular meeting starting in January again. And I feel like the whole team has gotten closer from it. And we do go off and banter into other things. And I think that's different from a normal, like if you were at a 9 to 5 corporation at the office, you might stay a little more focused on the meeting. Sometimes we go off and we're okay with that because we want to actually have those relationships and friendships too. So we kind of build that time in to make sure that we are not only just getting our work done, but we're like growing those relationships because that can be harder to do remote. So I think that's a big one. Sometimes I'll just Zoom, mostly our sales girl Carmen, just to talk while we're working, something like that, just so it's not so isolating, because it really can be. So you have to be careful and really thinking about like, have I talked to a human today?
Good stuff, Brant. I feel like you got some nuggets of wisdom sitting there.
Not really. Here's the thing is that because I mean people kind of think of me as being a social animal because I do this show and I speak publicly, and when we're on site, to a certain extent, we're hanging out, we're mixing, we're mingling, all that kind of stuff. But I'll be honest with you, I've never felt that isolation ever since I started working from home. It's kind of like I kind of like my quiet time. About a couple years in after I did it, my wife also started working from home, and I kind of missed just having the house to myself. It's like, and I, it's also great because I can go up, so we can have lunch together and all that kind of stuff. But it is kind of funny that it was kind of like I had to get used to working with someone again. Just like in the same office kind of thing where. Even just stuff like cleaning up the kitchen afterwards, after lunch, those kind of things, because like she'd have to rush off to a phone call or something, and there'd just be stuff out on the counter, and I'd be like, oh really, come on, I don't have to work in an office anymore. I'm supposed to have to deal with this kind of thing, right? So if she ever hears this, she's probably mortally embarrassed. But it's that same kind of office politics, right, that kind of pops up to a certain extent of like, hey, can you close your door when you're on a phone call? All of that kind of stuff comes back into play. So I guess for me, I didn't really struggle. I when I went out on my own, it was a very conscious decision, and I've talked about this on the show before. I was very lucky that I had kind of mentors that had prepped me for a lot of it. And so I've always been in that mentality of getting up, taking a shower, getting dressed for work, and going to work. And so that's always kind of helped with that mentality of like, okay, this is work time. And then really, as soon as the kids are home and I'm done with what I need to get done for the day, I do try and as much as possible switch that part off, and then spend time with the family or go out with friends and all that kind of good stuff. So for me, I kind of get my socializing through other means, like this show.
like this show. Yeah, like I mean, it's amazing how much social you can get online. Obviously, there's like social media and everything like that. One thing Mariana, you kind of hit on it a little bit that I also want to emphasize as part of my work routine too is adding in social activities throughout the week as well. I mean, this mainly happened with me in the events industry. I think it's just a general, also helpful thing for the events industry. But a lot of times we're working on weekends. If you find that your weekends are getting sacrificed because of work, you need to make up for that social time and that freedom in the middle of the week. So one of the best things I ever did was schedule literally in. I like sandbox dinners on Tuesdays. Wednesdays is board game night. Thursdays is movie night. Friday I try to do something fun. Back in the day, I used to be like doing high school dances on Friday. Saturday nights I did high school dances. Then Sunday was like decompress, watch video time, and and then repeat all day long. But I think that helps a ton too. That I've noticed even going to remote is that like, hey, like I'm gonna go do something fun and integrate that into the workflow. So
and push the people push the people in your life who not necessarily work remotely to also do those things with you. So like I not pressure, but like convince your friends and your boyfriends and girlfriends and roommates and whatever to let's play pool tonight. Let's go to the movies. Let's go for a freaking coffee because I'm losing my mind and I haven't talked to a human being in 48 hours. You know what I mean? Just don't let it get to the breaking point of isolation.
And I think what Mariana said so important, like if you are close to that breaking point and you need to talk to somebody, like reach out to your friend, like, or just see if they can go get coffee, or me and Sam will go on, make sure that we do Friday date nights. Shout out to my mom for making that possible. But like, it's so important to just get out. And sometimes I get used to being in the house other than like pick up and drop off for Chloe. And I have some trouble shutting off work. And so it's just so important to force yourself to go out and do other things or go with friends. And it's not really forcing because you have tons of fun, but just remembering to do it can be hard.
But that's a down. I'm sorry, Brett, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What? I was saying that I think that's also a good point to bring of you can shut off work, because I think that when you work remotely, you can very easily fall into one of both sides of the spectrum of if you're not disciplined and you don't have a routine, you can very easily slack off, like really easily, and not necessarily be the best you can be at your job because you're remote. You don't have the pressure of having to be physically in an office with people watching you work. And you can either fall on that side or the side of never being able to shut off work. Because you work remotely, there's always something that you could be doing, even if you've done everything that you could have done for that week. You know, it happened to me last week and I didn't work because sometimes I work on weekends. And I'm like, why aren't you working? Why aren't you working? I'm like, shut up. You have everything done. So it's really easy to fall into one of those sides of the spectrum, I feel.
You need super easy. You're just like, maybe I'll just do this one little thing, and it turns into like 3 things or whatever. But you have to be really careful.
Let's definitely come back to the overworking thing because I think that can be really, really huge. I do want to give a chance we have an audience question in the house that I think is good, and we might actually have to make this one a full episode to talk about, rather than just personal remote work strategies, maybe do teams. But I figured this is a good one that we can use to tease that episode. But Mark, one of our former event icons. In the house watching the show. Thank you for joining us today, Mark. He says this question's for Will, but I think I'm going to pose this one for everybody since each of you runs their own team inside of the company doing remote work. So believe it or not, I'm not the only one running staff meetings. In fact, I don't run any of the meetings. They're in charge of it all. So the question is, how is it managing a team that's global and remote, not having a normal staff meeting? So I'll kick this one off to Caitlin first, since you have a team that's literally spread across multiple time zones and everything like that. You want to talk a little bit about what it's like doing that, and maybe continued questions about how you make them different?
Sure. So it's interesting running a several teams that are global. Like I said earlier, Mariana, now I'm like, no, you're not in Portugal, and just blanked on where you are. Slovenia. I don't know where Mariana is.
Yeah, Slovenia. Yeah.
Okay. But either way, so she's there. I have people in Bangladesh. I've got people in the States. There's people on Eastern time, and there's people in California. And I've had a girl in Australia who is one of our writers who super awesome. But learning to work around their time zones and preparing, especially, I think one of the hardest parts was just like deadlines, because if I say something like, oh, it needs to be done noon Mountain Time, like that might be the middle of the night, or it might be Saturday for them, those kind of things. And so thinking about where they are when I set like deadlines for people, that kind of thing, or when we set up meetings, just learning to be flexible and really mindful of what time it is at theirs. So we're not asking them to do a meeting at like 2 a.m. in the morning if we can avoid it, and that kind of thing. Also, just cultural differences, knowing different holidays that maybe I don't have or celebrate that are in their worlds, and making sure that we're honoring those and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely been really interesting and eye-opening just to learn more about different cultures and learn how to work as a team, with so many people, so many different places. I personally love it. Me and Mariana talk about a ton of different things happening globally, and it's super fun. But it is something just to kind of learn the balance and when to chat people and when they're for sure sleeping or that kind of stuff. We use a lot of different tools to make sure we're not waking people up.
I like that. Yeah, I think one of the big things I can recommend is that you have to rely on asynchronous communication as much as synchronous communication. So not just relying on having lots of meetings, but being willing to use Slack to communicate and talk through things, and being able to admit when you have issues. Like whenever I have an issue and I can't get something done, I immediately try to like get help by posting in a Slack channel, and being able to utilize that too. So you aren't hitting people in the wrong time zones and everything like that. And I think one of the biggest things too, in general, to help with normal staff meetings and being global and remote, is this becomes part of your culture. Like I used to think that, oh yeah, our core values, our 6 core values that we care most about that are really important to our company. A 7th core value basically came out, which was remote work. And we started hiring based on that as well. People who are globally thinking, who are comfortable doing it. And we've fired people because they can't work remotely, and we fired people because they can't think globally, and maybe they can't respect the other cultures that are going on. But it's been really cool because it allows you to see an evolution of your culture in a lot of ways. I want to give Brant and Mariana a chance to answer these questions too, because I think you guys have perspectives attending the meetings, even though a lot of times that you guys have big, gigantic teams. What's kind of your guys' opinions on how you can manage a team that's global and all over the place, and working with teams that are all over the place as well? So whichever one of you guys wants to take it first. I feel like Brant, Mariana, you got it? Are you pointing at somebody else? She's doing the break.
She's pointing
Pointing to nothing.
All right, Brant, you got this one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're right that it is a mindset to a certain extent, that, as I started dealing more and more with people globally, because a lot of the event tech that's in the world isn't just based here in the US, right? There's a lot of really good event tech all over the world. And as I'm taking phone calls and things like that, I try to be, I really try to think about what time zone the person that I'm talking. So when I go to set a date or something in an email, I don't always do this, but I do try to put their time zone first and then my time zone. So first of all, it forces me to think about what time it is going to be for them for the appointment. And then it also, I think, it shows a level of respect. I think there's a lot of people in any business, any industry, that just they're always thinking about their time zone. And speaking as someone who's just in the central US, central time zone, even in the US, you can kind of feel like there's certain people that just clearly they put the meeting when it's most convenient for them without giving any thought to that you might even be in a different time zone. A lot of times it'll be someone on the West Coast or on the East Coast who just always seem to schedule something over my lunch hour, because they're thinking about when it's convenient for them as opposed to when it's going to be convenient for you. And so I would just kind of suggest that as part of this is that it is a mindset, really thinking about where the other people are, and invest in a good app or something for double checking times. There's like World Time Buddy and a bunch of other ones, and keep those handy so that it's easy. And then as you get like a customer or a potential customer or a client or something like that, add that as like a hot button, so that you're always seeing their time. On Macs, you can just swipe to the left and it'll bring in the notification page. You can add world clocks to that side. So if you're working with a client in a different time zone, you can keep that super handy. I mean, just a simple swipe to the left, and you've got the access to those clocks right there. A lot of different apps for both iPhone and Android for keeping track. Even ones that you can punch in a potential time, and it'll do the factoring of daylight savings time and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it is kind of a mindset.
I definitely want to echo before we pass off to Mariana for her tips as well, is that we're going to link to it all down below, because I'm sure because Mariana is going to definitely do it because she's a boss at that. I'm going to try to put together a list of all these remote tool directories I found over the years. A lot of them I find on Product Hunt, but there's a lot of these sites that say like the top 100 tools for remote tool people, and there's a lot of great clock tools as well. Like I know one that allows you to put all your teammates in the different time zones. So when you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I need this person, this person, this person, this person, it shows you which time zones they're on. And you can say, when's the best meeting time for everybody, that it's daylight when it is there for them. So very, very cool. We'll link to all those down below. But Mariana, I know you got tons of tips for what it's like working on a remote team globally as well.
I'm sorry, I was using my mouse instead of my pad, and it's not even connected. It's late. So I think that it's important to put it out there that remote work is it's my normal. So even the internship that I had before I started actually working, it was more in a remote regime than it was in a office 9 to 5 kind of regime. So yeah, this is what I know, and this is what hopefully I will know for a long, long time. Because I really like working remotely. More on that later. But yeah, I'm not on the side of the person that manages or the person that books the meetings in either of the companies that I work for. But what Brent said, I think it's the most important thing, is that you see that there's a mutual level of respect between you and the people who are above you when scheduling meetings with you and trying to manage you. So that level of respect, if it's not there, try to establish it. But honestly, if it's a remote company that's been doing this for a while, I think it's there by default, because otherwise I don't think you can run a successful business if fully remotely if you don't have this kind of practice in place. You know what I mean? But so yeah, I'm not the person who manages, but I also try to be mindful of meeting times, and when I have to meet with Caitlin or meet with the content team or meet with other teams in other jobs that I have, also try to be mindful of that. What else? Let me think. Yeah, not being in the manager position is really easy, guys. I'm sorry. You do all the heavy lifting. I just say yes and I show up.
Yeah, but even then, like you let me know, like if it's like, Caitlin,
Yes.
that's a Saturday by that
Yes.
time, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, and then we reschedule it or whatever. One thing me and Mariana always do is that I know when I go to sleep, she's gonna write something, and then when I wake up, it's gonna be ready, and then so she's kind of working on it as I'm sleeping, and then I'll message her something like, hey, I know you're sleeping right now, but this is for tomorrow, and here's this thing, and I a lot of the times will use like screen recording just so I can show her something. So it's kind of like better than a text, but not exactly a meeting, just to visually show something. We've been working on some website design together, and it's been kind of funny, but but we've done a lot of it through like videos and screen sharing and just sharing docs and things. So I think
There's so many tools to make remote work not just possible but extremely successful. You know, and I think it's perfect. Like, I was worried that we would, and I'm sure you were worried too, that we would have such a big time difference between us. But I think it just works perfect.
it doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't, because communication, like over communication in remote work, is
So
necessary.
important.
Not just communication, but over communication. I think that's the biggest tip I have to give, honestly.
Yeah. We both always let each other know like when something's coming up, or so we're pretty aware of like everything going on, and we can anticipate things that way and plan content around it. So it's not, okay, it's Mariana had her birthday this other weekend, and I made sure, like, I was like, you better not pick up one piece of content on your birthday. Like, we will work so that we fix it and you don't have to. And
I
those
did
kind of
it.
things. She
Yeah.
didn't. But we work around that. Like, if we know you're going on a trip, and that's kind of like, it should be a thing with all work, but I feel like in remote work, it's just extra flexible, and we just over communicate everything so that we have that flexibility, and there's not deadlines we're running up against the wall on left and right.
I think over communication is definitely huge. These guys know I preach it all the time that like there's no such thing as over communication. There's you'll in the remote work, it's just called communication. You have to just get everything out there as much as possible. All right, so want to give another shout out to another viewer that we got in the house, Bryce Clark. Thank you so much for joining us. Says yes, teamwork strategies would be awesome. I hope you're enjoying all these teamwork strategies that we've been sharing so far. If you have any specific questions for anybody who's watching right now, you know this is a live show and you get to ask questions. So ask those questions in the comments. They go straight to us and we love to ask them of our icons that we have here right now. Follow-up question to something we started talking about a little bit earlier, and you talked a little bit about how you told Mariana not to work on her birthday, and we talk a little bit about trying not to work on weekends and things like that. When you're working at home and literally your desk is 5 feet away from your bed, sometimes it's the same room as your bedroom. How do you guys avoid overworking when remote, which I think is it's funny because when people start companies or remote companies are trying to go remote, they always go, well, how do you know everyone's working? How do you know they're getting things done? And it's actually the opposite. How do you know they're not working all the time and overworking themselves and burning themselves out? So what's your guys' best pro tips? I'll start with Brant because Brant, you work a ton. You're on site on shows and then you have client emails and you're recording podcasts. How do you avoid overworking when you're remote and not just working 24/7?
You don't. I mean, it's a constant struggle, right? And so it's a lot of it is trying to work smarter instead of harder. When I was on the road, I actually went out of my way to try and work more, if that makes sense, so that I wasn't so behind by the time I got home. So, I mean, it's too easy when you're on the road to say, I'll deal with that when I'm back in the office. I'll deal with that. And I just knew going in that if I did that for a month, I would be so buried that I would, I would get home and just be like pulling what's left of my hair out, trying to then get caught up. So I very intentionally actually, anytime I had some downtime, just clearing out emails, deleting stuff en masse, saying realistically, I'm not going to listen to those podcasts, just so that and then only the things that I truly couldn't do until I got back in the office did I put off. And so as a result, it used to be that if I was on the road for, even a few days, it would take me a week to feel like I was caught up once I got back in the office. And as a result, as a result of working that way, working intentionally, I was gone for a month and it still only took me a week to get caught up, if that makes sense, as opposed to well beyond that. So that being said, okay, how do you avoid overworking? You just have to be very intentional about it. So literally, I was going through my calendar as I was kind of making sure that things were blocked off as we were trying to schedule some stuff. And I realized I had a Friday with nothing in it and a Monday with nothing in it. So I immediately blocked that off and said, okay, that's Brent taking a vacation because there's nothing on that Friday and there's nothing on that Monday. I'm going to take a 4-day weekend and shut down and just be off for that amount of time. Now, am I going to check my emails just to make sure there's no fires? Sure, because I've got to keep an eyeball on my active projects. But for the most part, you have to be pretty intentional about it and take time off when you can and schedule vacations. And don't let it just keep getting put off and keep getting put off. And I don't claim to be perfect about it, but it's something that I'm continuing to work on.
Mariana, what tips do you have?
So I think I said this at the beginning, but I think it's worth emphasizing. I think if you want to work remotely, discipline is like the word you have to live by, because it's what I said. It's a very slippery slope, because if you're not a disciplined person, you can really easily work too much or not work enough. So what works for me personally, like I'm a list person. I'm a person who likes to write things down and have a little planner with lots of stickers and glitter and whatever. Love me some tech, but my planner is like sacred. And I plan the meetings that I'm going to have, and I plan how many posts I have to write or how many pillar pages I have to do or how much research I have to do and articles to edit. And I plan my week ahead on weekends. And this is what works for me. I know this is not going to work for everyone, but it works because it helps me structure my days and my weeks, and it helps me say, this day I want to go to the gym, and this day I want to do this, and this day I don't want to do that. So that's something that helps. But another thing that I want to emphasize is that the perks that come with remote work is that, especially if you have as big a time difference as I have with Endless and with my other companies, that because they don't start to work until what is like my 3, 4, 5 p.m. If I have to take a morning, I can take a morning and I can make up for that morning on a Saturday or on a Sunday. And I don't mind this because I already took a morning during the week. You know what I mean? This is not a luxury that people who work a normal 9 to 5 can afford, but I can. And I feel like this is a good thing that can also be a bad thing. But I think that if you're a disciplined person, it's gonna work for you. I just think that just because you work on weekends, it doesn't mean you're overworking, because you already allowed yourself to take that morning or that afternoon during the week. Not even just to go for the doctor, just for personal time, which is very underrated, by the way. And this is what I like about remote work culture, is that you're not prioritizing your work over your life or your life over your work, and you just find this balance that I think it's really important to have in life, and I really appreciate that. So that's my 2 cents.
It's a great point. You can absolutely use time zones to your advantage. And that when I've got a client who's primarily Pacific Coast, and they're kind of my primary client at the moment, that gives me 2 hours in the morning that I can work out or do whatever I want to do, for those 2 hours, because I don't have to schedule anything.
Like, to me, it's perfect that I can go to the gym at 9 in the morning as opposed to going at 7 in the morning, which is what I would have to do if I worked a normal 9 to 5. That's huge for me. Huge.
I think the discipline you bring up is huge. Yeah, Caitlin, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that can be a pro and a con, because I have people in what feels like every time zone right now. Sometimes I have trouble, and I've gotten a lot better at this, but like setting a boundary and just making sure that I have like my working hours, and like Mariana and the rest of the team know that I'm probably not going to reply if you chat me. I might reply, but I shouldn't reply after like 8 or so my time, just because, she might be waking up, or other people are waking up during that time and they're messaging me. So just having those boundaries, like, it is cool when you have those different time zones, just how our workflow works so beautifully, partially because of the time zones and the differences, and everybody's kind of like doing their part. The next person wakes up and does their part, the next person wakes up, and it works out so well. But you also at the same time have to tell yourself, like, it's okay to not message people back right away, and like set those boundaries. I know, like, I definitely got super overwhelmed with remote work around July, I think. And I ended up putting my daughter in school 5 days a week. And it was something that I was like, didn't think I'd have to do because I'm remote, but I had to remember, like, you have to have working hours and a better balance for your own mental health and everything. And so just finding that balance and setting the boundaries, I think, is really, really important, even with the time zones.
And on that note, like on the on the messages note, I think one thing that could be like a good tip is that after like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. your time, you turn off Slack notifications.
Yeah, I finally did that, but only
because I didn't used to do it. And it was like 10 p.m. and I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna see it. And it's bad for you. It's bad for your significant other if you have one. Like, it's just set that boundary.
Mute it.
Yeah, I'm definitely a huge proponent of that for sure. I mean, like, make it so you have the choice and it's your choice to look at the notification, not the phone pushing it on you, for sure. And people sometimes freak out because they're afraid they're going to miss something. But like, there's tons of communication channels. If let's talk about like fire zone. Like, if someone needs to get a hold of me, usually something really bad's happening, right? And I always just freak out. Like, what happens if I go on Slack and someone's like trying to message me, and I go, literally, everyone has my cell phone number. Everyone knows how to email me. Maybe that's probably a little bit slower, actually. But like, literally, people know how to get a hold of me and get a hold of me. And I found that, like, I remember the one time when I went to Panama and I turned off electricity for like a week, and I remember I kind of told people. I don't really remember telling many people, but like, luckily someone on the team was getting my emails and taking care of it. But like, I came out of it and I was like, did anything happen? They said, yeah, one person was trying to get a hold of you, but I connected them with someone else on the team. They're totally fine now. Like, everything ends up working out okay. And I think that you have to just remember that along the entire process. We don't have a ton of time left, but I feel feeling, as we always like to say at the end of the show, that part 2 is coming soon for this. But I'd love to talk a little bit about workspaces, because I think that workspaces are an incredibly important part of remote work culture, right? And, you know, we talk about discipline, but I think also setting yourself up for success if you want to go remote is important. And you guys all have incredibly unique workspaces along the entire way. And I know Brant and I love to talk about this all day long. So maybe I'll start with Mariana, since I don't know much about what your desk setup is like, but, you know, when you're working, like, what sort of like way are you, how are things set up? What things are important to you? Tell us about your workspace.
I just need 2 things. I need my computer and some coffee, and that's it. It's light life. No, but if I go to the coffee shop, I'd really just have my computer, maybe my Bluetooth earphones, because I like to listen to podcasts sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts is my work.
I was like,
The other podcasts when I'm doing other work. But yeah, headphones, computer, charger, obviously, because I go through like 2 charges a day. Your computer is your entire life if you work remote. Pro tip. My phone too, and sometimes my planner and the little pen. And when I'm working at home, I have my 2 little baby flowers, because I like nature and I like to be surrounded by nature when I'm close at home.
those are little.
That's
All
it.
right.
That's
Cool. Caitlin, what about you? What's your work setup look like?
I always have a notepad. I'm that person. Like, it's always here. I have to have that, even if I'm out at a coffee shop or something, just to jot down ideas or whatever on, or my to-do list, that kind of thing. Obviously, computer, good Wi-Fi, because we do tons of video calling all the time. And so if your internet sucks, it's going to be like just blocks of blur and awfulness for you. So I think that's really important for me. And also just like, I like to have a comfortable chair. Right now I'm sitting on an exercise ball because I got tired of my chair today. Brant's on one too. Will's got one. Yes, they're so comfortable.
What
and so
is this? Where can I get this?
Amazon for like $20.
Yeah,
This
20
is
bucks.
oh my god! What a
'Cause,
world!
I basically just didn't want to buy like a really expensive chair, so I tried it and I was like, this is way better anyway. So I think that coffee for me too, or water. I always like have a water bottle, make sure I'm drinking a lot, because it's easy for me to just like sit and just crank out work forever without remembering to eat and drink. So always have that, or like my coffee's here too. That kind of stuff is really important to me while I'm working, just so I'm comfortable. Some music, things like Spotify, but without words. I don't know how you listen to podcasts while you work, Mariana. I would be writing. I'd just start typing them. So I listen to a lot of like no word music, like explosions in the sky, or like if I'm feeling like kind of hyper, bass nectar. It just kind of depends on my mood, but I can't do words.
Nice. I like it.
I don't think I'd be able to read.
All right, I know a lot about Brant's setup because we talk about it all the time, and I think you're about to hear the 2 nerdiest people talk about their setups and how they just
It's about
perfect
to
it.
get real technical.
But Brant, lay it on us. What's your like setup look like, and what's important to you?
Well, I mean, here's the thing, though, is that, you know, depending on where I'm at and what I'm doing, you know, like Mariana said, I can get by with just laptop, right? You know, it's really the core of what I need is just that. Everything else is bonus. It's gravy, right? So the majority, like we've talked about on some of the other shows, I've got my Surface Pro 6 that I quite enjoy. I still liking it over a year in at this point. Will's, I know, trying to get me to move to the X, but we'll see. So I, you know, and for me, that's my mobile office, right? Because I've got the pen, I can take notes, I can do, you know, anything that I can need to do Windows wise. So for me, that's really digging on what I do. As a result, actually my desk and stuff here is pretty zen, because I if I figure that's all I really need is a, is my computer. I've got things kind of set up with as little as possible on my desk. I do have, but that being said, there's still quite a bit of crap on my desk because I have 2 keyboards. Because when we're on the shows, I use a lightweight Bluetooth quiet keyboard, so that it's you don't
Not
get
one
a
of
click-
these.
because I do have the big clickety clack keyboard, and that's what I use mainly when I'm typing, writing articles or things like that. If I'm doing any kind kind of extended typing, I have to have the big clickety clack.
So
I
nice.
recommend WASD keyboards. They're custom keyboards built. They're probably built in China, but they're designed in I think San Francisco, and they're quite good. I like it a lot. Otherwise, I actually don't usually keep my camera on my desk, so when I'm not actively on the show, I set it down on the floor and get that out of the way. Otherwise, I've just got my speakers. I've recently switched to. I used to be a notebook person wholeheartedly, and I'm trying really hard to go straight to my iPad actually. So I've started keeping my iPad open, so that all I have to do is just do the Touch ID, reach over and Touch ID, and I've got my pen in a little stand on my desk as well. So I've got the Apple Pencil just sitting in a stand. So literally trying to make it as close as possible to being able to just grab a pen and write something down. I know it takes a little bit longer because I have to turn it on and, get into the note-taking app or whatever. But I'm trying to see if the benefits outweigh the negatives of that, because being able to change everything then immediately to printed text and copy and paste it into emails or into OneNote or something along those lines, I think is going to pay off in the long run, even down to like calculate. And it's less things on my desk again. So I'm using the calculator in the iPad as opposed to my actual calculator, things like that. So yeah, I try and keep it pretty zen. And then a lot of my travel thing in general is trying to keep things as same as possible. So same as what you have, same food, same soap, same, as much as you can have the same. And so as part of that, again, I don't usually, I'll have the iPad on the road and, that kind of stuff. So keeping it the same. And if all I truly need is my laptop, then I shouldn't need a bunch of crap on my desk.
I'll definitely concur. I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but yeah, like I use the same shampoo and soap and everything like that I use at home when I use it on the go. So it makes you just feel more like you're at home and gets you in the same mindset as well. I'm going to burn through mine really as fast as possible because I love talking about my setup and all the things. But we'll start with the laptop on the go is the Surface Pro X, which we did an Event Tech podcast all about. So we'll just link to that and you can listen all about that one. I've been still loving that thing. One of my favorite remote working things, which I have shared this with so many remote working people, is these Plantronics headsets. I literally break them all, these bigger ones all the time because I accidentally shove them in my backpack and then don't really care if they break, apparently. But this headset I've given to so many people. Every single salesperson has it at Endless, anyone who does calls regularly. And I can be in a loud pub in Ireland with background music playing with a band 5 feet away from me and they can't hear it. They hear me crystal clear. Sounds fantastic. Has long battery life. Super comfortable. I like it a lot. I'm currently testing out the Plantronics 5220, which is just one single ear and looks like one of those kind of like corporate Bluetooth headsets, but it has the same exact microphone as this one. And I've been really liking that. So that's my new to go. And this is my desk headset. But best recommendation I recommend is if you do calls at all, just buy one of the Plantronics headsets who has amazing noise canceling, not to cancel out noise from hearing, but canceling out noise from the microphone, because it opens up where you can work way more than I have to be in a quiet coffee shop, which I found like the quiet coffee shops usually hated when I talked on the phone. And these guys know like I'm the loudest person ever when I'm on the phone as well. So that's one of my best tips that I can have for you. Also, just get the fastest internet connection you can at your house. Like no excuses. Like just spend the money on it and you'll just never have to worry about internet ever again. I know Brant recently upgraded fiber a couple months ago or so. And we used to joke about like uploading files and stuff, but now like we never have internet issues ever. And it's just phenomenal. Someone can go game in the other room. They can download big files. My friends can come over and co-work. I don't care. Like I never utilize my internet 100%, but it's just rock solid.
Hey, weird pro tip on that, just because I ran into it and it's the kind of thing that you never know what might be useful to someone, is we upgraded and I was having a lot of weird like Zoom issues and like video frazzles and weird things. And after trying to eliminate everything, I replaced the cable. And I realized I was using a really old cable that I'd kind of cobbled together, and built myself. And so make sure if you do get one, and it was fine for slower connections, but once you tried to push that higher bandwidth through it, it started cacking out. So make sure you're using high quality Cat 6 or Cat 6E cables that are, at this point relatively inexpensive. Cat 6A.
Go to our Wi-Fi terms blog.
Exactly.
That took me like 300 hours to write.
So pro tip, if you're not getting your full speed or it's getting weird after you upgrade your internet, check your cables.
And then the last pro tip I'll have for you is also build if you feel like you can't get work done at the split of a second at your home office, just get a fast computer and really nice up and make this like your dream. Like Mariana said, this is your workload. This is your office. So like I have a triple wide or like a ultra wide monitor that lets me put two windows exactly side by side on the same window, and that's been game changing. Having a super fast computer has been game changing. I'm trying to think anything else home office related. Nope, that'll be it for now. We'll probably just do another episode on it. But with Event Tech Podcast, we talk a lot about like our workflows and things like that, working remotely. So I'm sure we've talked about it before. Okay, so we got a couple minutes left. Do you guys think we should do the one tip question, or should we do your because we kind of just did resources a little bit right now. Should we do the one tip, final tip, wrap it all together in one?
Tip.
So, well, let's do what's your one tip for remote work that you have for anybody related to anything at all? So these guys are thinking really hard.
I mean, for me, a lot of it is email management. I still I think people too easily just give up. They're like, I can never do it. I can never inbox zero. It's just such a mess. I can't even handle it. And I think that's why there's a lot of pressure sometimes to use things like Slack, which I feel has its own positives and negatives, right? There's pluses to Slack and there are negatives to Slack. Things get lost in Slack just as much as they get lost in email. So I don't buy that as an excuse. Sometimes people say, oh, I just can never find anything in my email. Shit gets lost in Slack too. So it's one of those things that, so for me personally, there are ways, and I'm happy, maybe that's another episode as well that we can, because I know we talked about Inbox Zero a while ago on an episode. I think it is totally doable. It's totally doable for event professionals. It's totally doable even if you're the type of person that has 10,000, new messages in their inbox sitting right now, bouncing up and down, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. We can get you to zero. You just have to be a little bit vigilant and use filters like nobody's business.
I like it. I think we're going to do I want to do an Event Brew episode on why Slack is it helping or hurting the industry, and like talk about that chat culture, because that's a really good one. Maybe we'll move to Event Tech Podcast. We'll fight over it.
You guys can decide.
Cage match. Mariana, you got a tip for us? Best remote working tip?
Yes, I'm going to say try as hard as you can to establish some sort of a routine, not something that's super rigid, something that's flexible, but something that you have at least the bare bones of what you're going to do this day or this week, so you don't fall into the trap of, again, working either too much or not enough. I think that's what helps me the most.
I like it. Caitlin, lay it on us with your one tip.
Well, I definitely agree with Mariana. I think probably for me, the only way this works is really liking your job and finding meaning in it. Because I think if I hated my job, I would just go to Target during the day or something like that. I don't know. So I think along with obviously and limiting distractions is a big one for me too. So just making sure that I'm not by a TV, making sure my phone is not within reach, because I get distracted pretty easily. Making sure Chloe's out with school, that kind of stuff, so I can really focus is really big. And then, but at the end of the day, making sure that I believe in what I'm doing, because if I didn't, I'm not sure how this would go. So having that belief and a really strong team has made all the difference for me. If I didn't have my teams, oh my God, I tell them all the time, but I don't even know.
I like it. So my one tip probably won't come to a surprise to anyone who has been watching this show or is a fan of this show, but I think, back in the day when we all used to work, not all of us used to work, but back in the day when remote work didn't exist, right? And there were maybe factories or someone was making your shoes by hand rather than in a factory. There was carpenters and things like that. They had tools, right? And if they had a crappy hammer or a crappy knife or something like that, it would slow them down from getting work done and not be able to do it. I think far too often people look at technology and apps and things like that as a hindrance to getting work done, but you have to look at it as a tool, and you have to find what tools work best for you and what's the best job for the job. And that can allow you to get so much work done. I can't tell you how many times that people say, how do you get so much stuff done? How do you have time in the day? And it's because like I use the apps that let me get stuff done. I use the tools that I feel best with that allow me to stay connected. You have to find out what those tools are. And if you don't know where to start, just go watch the last 200 episodes of EventIcons where everyone says their favorite tool and resources out there, and you'll get exact good idea of what it looks like. But I think we have to start looking at it that way and not be afraid of apps or, oh, I have to get a new computer, like things like that. Like we can't get stuck in those days. These are our tools, and this is what gets our stuff done all day long. So that's my number one tip. Well, we come to the end of an hour. Guys, who knew that we could talk about remote work for a whole hour and time just completely blinks on by. Before we wrap up, I do want to get some shout outs. We got a couple last minute comments in. Leslie left a comment saying it's you, and I'm not sure. This is right around the time that we were asking about like number one tips and resources. So I'm gonna selfishly think that she's talking about EventIcons being her number one resource and tip that she has, or not for when it comes to everything. So thank you, Leslie, for watching the show and enjoying the show and being a watcher. Also, shout outs to the one and only Chris Simmons. Chris is one of our amazing lighting engineers. I want to say audio. I was going to say audio visual engineers, but one of our amazing lighting engineers from Endless watching the show today and talking about how working remote was great when he did it. I know Chris also loves to prep in the warehouse a lot of times too, so that means a lot coming around. So thanks so much for joining us today, Chris. Whew, I think that does it for another episode, guys. We didn't really plan this, but do you guys want me to wrap this one up with a bow? Or do we always want to just force Brant to do it? Because Brant always ends up the show when he's sitting on camera. What do you guys feel like? Or should we just like totally throw a curveball and make Mariana end the show?
No.
You've heard it enough times. Come on, you don't have it memorized at this point?
At this point, I probably do. All of them.
But not under pressure.
Not under pressure. We're coming for you next time, Mariana. We will make you do it. I'm not going to make Brand do it because we always force Brand to do it. So I'll wrap the show up for this one. Thanks, everybody, for watching. All our people in the audience. Mark, Leslie, Bryce, Chris. We get a couple others in. Aaron, Sarah, Marissa, Sahidi for also joining us as well. All our amazing viewers and anyone else who didn't leave comments. You got to leave those comments down below so we know you're watching. We always appreciate it. We do this every single week. Some cool things keep coming down the pipeline as we got some updated times and things coming your guys' way. Can't leak too much on it, but we're going to be creating some more flexible ways for you to watch live and ask questions moving forward. So stay tuned on that one. And if you are watching this just live right now, go over to event-icons.com, subscribe so you can watch future episodes, even binge watch them Netflix style on your own time. Just go to event-icons.com. If you are watching the recording of this and you want more of this stuff and you didn't know that we have this show and it's on things other than Spotify, go to event-icons.com. You're gonna get some invites. We have Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. We also post this live on social media, so you can go and subscribe on there so you get notified when we go live and get your questions answered as well. And as we said before, we got a part 2 probably coming maybe on this one too. So you got to subscribe so you don't miss that one as well. Whew. I think that's everything. I think so. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. This has been EventIcons. Brant, am I missing anything, Caitlin? Mariana? Well, thanking you guys is the biggest one. Thank you guys for being on the show and making this episode happen, sharing your knowledge bombs all day long. And we appreciate you guys being here. So, all right, I'm just gonna get out of here while I can. But you guys, I'm just losing my mind over here. Thank you guys for listening. This has been EventIcons. Will Curran, Brant Kruger, Mariana Fernandez, and Caitlin Colston. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons.
To catch all the bonus content, resources mentioned, and an invite to our Facebook and LinkedIn groups,
Head to www.event-icons.com. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.